What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back to the video. It's Tuesday. It's time to take a look at the waiver wire for week 10. Nothing crazy this week. There are definitely some solid options at every position besides wide receiver. Wide receiver is not looking very good. There's basically no one new there. I think the obvious top claim this week is at running back, and that's Keaton Mitchell. He had his first career carry this week, and boy, did he have a really, really good game. He only played 14 total offensive snaps, played 13 on special teams still, but he handled 9 carries. So you think, okay, 14 snaps, 9 carries, couldn't have done all that much. Commands 1 target on those 14 snaps as well. Gains 138 rushing yards and a score. Goes backwards 4 yards on that target. But point is, on the ground, he looked awesome. Also very encouraging. I think a lot of people look at the box score and be like, oh, it was all because of the blowout. No, Justice Hill was the one that got all those blowout snaps. Mitchell entered the game on the Ravens' 5th drive. So they started with Gus Edwards. Gus was still the starter in this game, but 5th drive for the Ravens. We see Mitchell enter. It's like the mid-second quarter at this time. Rips off runs of 11, 9, 9, 8 yards. Then gets vultured by Gus Edwards for a 3-yard rushing touchdown. He then did nothing on the second drive of the third quarter before ripping off a 40-yard touchdown on the next drive, and they had a 60-yard carry the drive after that. Then after that, Justice Hill gets the rest of the running back touches in the blowout. So basically thus far, I mean, Mitchell is pretty clearly ahead of Justice Hill as the running back too, and while Gus is always going to have a large goal line role, Mitchell could genuinely push Gus for early down usage. Like, this could very easily be an early down split, plus Mitchell getting passing down work, still mixing in at the goal line. I think all season they're going to probably bring Gus in to be that goal line back. And so Gus is still going to have, that upside, going to take that away from Mitchell. But we saw this week, has the 40-yard carry, scores from out there. And even if he's not scoring, a ton of touchdowns, he'll have a few. They'll keep him in there a few times, and he'll be highly efficient on the ground. So we don't want to overreact to a 14-snap game, be like, oh, he's going for 100 to score every week. He could pretty easily next week come out and have 4 carries for 13 yards, and we're like, oh, why did we go after him so heavily? I think the reason we want to, though, is just because of the potential. We're late enough in the season where, if someone clearly looks like a very, very good ad rest of season, you should be willing to spend a lot of fab on them, spend a top claim on them, because there's only so many more possibilities to use that number 1 claim on. And also, there is a real chance that you can get like consistent, 10 or 11 touches per game. And if it's coming on this offense with how explosive he looked in this game, then he needs to be a top option for everyone, even if you're not desperate for running back, just because that would be really, really good. 10 or 11 touches at running back on this offense would make him a potential start every single week and a really good start in specific matchups. You don't find that on free agency that much anymore. So bump it up or bump it down depending on if you need running back or not. I'm thinking around 20% of your fab. Again, if you have running backs you trust, you don't need to spend that. If you're like, oh, I don't really care if I get them. All right, put in at least 10% and see if you get them. If you really need running back, you're like, Nick, I'm going to lose if I don't get this kid. We'll obviously bump it up as much as you really want there, but I do think he's worth a number 1 claim. After Mitchell, running back appeal definitely does start to fall off a tad. We're still going after Charbonnet, especially after a second consecutive week where he outsnapped Ken Walker. Note that it was trailing. That's why he outsnapped him by so much, was the game script favored passing, in which case Charbonnet is going to get more snaps than Walker, because Charbonnet gets all the third down snaps, all the clear passing down snaps, all the 2-minute snaps. And so when they're in these trailing scripts, it's going to be Charbonnet over Ken Walker for the rest of the season. We can't start him yet, but he remains one of the highest upside handcuffs in fantasy. He's a running back 1 in any week that Ken Walker misses. Again, you got to be stashing players like that, especially at this point in the season. I'd also look at Ty Chandler this week. Cam Akers towards Achilles, so we'll see what they decide to do with the other backups. But Chandler should be the direct backup at this point to Madison. Dobbs also looked really, really good last week. So while the Vikings won't be as good without Cousins, obviously it's going to be a downgrade going from Cousins to any quarterback that they could have realistically gotten. Dobbs was probably the best option of someone they could have acquired, and so not as drastic of a drop off as it would have been had they not made that trade. Also, Chandler has looked really good this season. They basically never use him. Like, his touches have been very limited, but he's clearly explosive, and if they start to utilize him more, giving him like 7 or 8 touches a game, not going to be someone you're starting in an 8, 10, or 12 team league, but could he command a little bit of a larger role later on the season if he continues playing well? Maybe. So I don't think you're spending much fab to get him. If you want to throw 2% on him, sure. Maybe like a 5th, 6th, 7th claim, sure. I don't think that's a bad idea. Honestly, if you know your league and you're like, I don't think anyone's going to go after him, just let him clear waivers and go and maybe add him after. It's still more of a speculative pick, but one that I think could work out. And the last running back is Rico Dowdle. Probably going to make Pollard owners throw up a little bit, but in deeper formats, I definitely at least look at him. I highly doubt that they're ever actually going to bench Pollard. Like, that's just not going to happen this season, no matter how he plays. Pollard is going to be the running back one. And I maintain that he's getting super unlucky. We'll talk about him in tomorrow's trade video. But I maintain he's getting unlucky. I think he's going to have a breakout game soon. But Dowdle, like, objectively still looks very, very good out there. And if Pollard continues to struggle, maybe there's a chance that Dowdle gets a little bit more run later in the year. And so if you're in a deeper format, maybe that can help you out. The main appeal here is just handcuff. At this point of the season, you should be kind of using that bench. You should have your starting roster kind of start to figure out at this point. And so you're using your bench to be, okay, well, what if something happens? What if Tony Pollard gets injured? What if Ken Walker gets injured? We have 2 running backs that could be very, very useful in fantasy. Your last bench spot, I think it's worth just taking a shot there. But definitely for him, only add. No one's going after Dowdle this week, so don't spend any fab, don't spend a claim, just add him. At wide receiver, there's basically nothing. I'll quickly touch on some names that we've basically already been over in past weeks, but there's nothing really new for wide receiver. Top options are Demario Douglas, Michael Wilson, Zay Jones, then just some deeper league flyers on Jalen Tolbert, on Cedric Wilson. Douglas played 83% of the snaps last week. He caught 5 of 7 targets for 55 yards. As we went over last week, he's not a high ceiling player. He's not going to go out there and have 8 for 150 and 2. That's just not really in his range of outcomes. Everything he does is pretty close to the line of scrimmage. He'll get some work intermediate, but he's definitely not getting work deep downfield. But especially in like full PPR leagues, especially like 12-team full PPR, he can be a consistent 5 or 6 catches every week. And if he can get you around 10, 11 points, spikes up to 16, 17 if he's scoring a touchdown, which he'll be used in the red zone. Won't be featured, but he'll be one of the more featured wide receivers, at least in the red zone. They'll use their tight ends and running backs a lot, but he'll have a role in that area. Again, full PPR leagues, I definitely go after him, and even in half PPR, worth rostering, honestly, if he's the number 1 on this team. Then Michael Wilson should return this week, and with Kyler set to return, his ceiling should be a lot higher. Now, to be fair, like I've said all season, like Dobbs has been playing well. Dobbs has not been terrible, so the upgrade from Dobbs into Kyler Murray isn't going to be incredible, right? But it's still going to lead to a higher ceiling. Like, Kyler is still going to be better than Dobbs, or likely going to be better than Dobbs when he returns. And it's really just that ceiling. Like, if we have Dobbs production, if we have close to Dobbs production, the rest of the season for Wilson, he'll probably be good, but he'll probably be someone who gives you like 50 or so yards per game. And you're always like, okay, I could use him in the flex or second flex or wide receiver 3 spot if I needed to, but I'm not expecting a lot of production. It's just, what if Kyler comes back? He's a really big upgrade. This offense finally gets going. Well, now Michael Wilson could bump up to, 65, 70 yards in some of these matchups. Now, if he's adding on a touchdown, he's actually a really good start. So it's unlocking that ceiling potential. I think that just wasn't there with Dobbs. And so a decent pick on free agency. Because also, he's a rookie center breakout in the second half, and he's been really good this season. Then Zay Jones, he's been out for forever, but close to returning soon. Watch practice reports, but he should return soon from his injury. Once he does, he's going to step right into like a 16 or so % target share on a good offense. He'll have weekly value. Another name that's probably not a high ceiling player. He's never going to be a consistent wide receiver 2, but I'm sure he's been dropped in a lot of leagues where he should be rostered and people have just kind of forgotten about him. Again, once he's back, he'll step into a good role in this team, and we've seen him be productive in the past. And then Tolbert, Cedric Wilson, more just deeper league ads. Tolbert got a lot of buzz this summer, hasn't panned out yet, but that's because the playing time wasn't there. He's starting to get more looks because of how poorly Gallup and Cooks have been playing. And so it wouldn't be shocking to see him go out there, every week moving forward at around like 50, maybe you can push 60% of the snaps. And if that happens, if he can be a little bit productive on those snaps, because again, he had a lot of buzz in the summer, maybe he's a little bit better than people think. If you are in a 14 or 16 team league, he's definitely a name worth considering. And the same basically goes for Cedric Wilson. Again, these two, I don't think 8, 10, 12 team leagues, I don't think you're touching them, but he was the wide receiver 3, like the last kind of couple of weeks, he's been like trending in that direction. Last week was his high snap share. He was utilized as their wide receiver 3 last week. If that holds basically in deeper leagues, he'll be worth rostering. If we knew every week we're getting a wide receiver getting like 65, 70% of the snaps on this offense, that's going to come with some weekly upside. He was inefficient last week, still scored the touchdown, but he's inefficient. That'll kind of reverse course a little bit. He's not going to catch like 20% of his targets long term. The point is, if you've just got a wide receiver that's going to have that role rest of season, that's valuable. But again, only deeper leagues. At tight end, basically have to talk about Taysom Hill. He now is the tight end 8 in points per game on the season and is first ahead of Kelsey, Andrews, and Hawkinson over the last 4 weeks. Now, he's gotten incredibly lucky last couple weeks, right? He has 5 touchdowns on 38 total opportunities over the last 3 weeks. And that's despite 0 touchdowns on 41 opportunities in weeks 1 through 6 when he was the tight end 30 in points per game. So again, he's getting very lucky with touchdowns, even if he's a gadget player. You look at the first 41 touches, no touchdowns, last 38, 5 touchdowns. A little bit of a difference there. It's going to even out over time. He's probably not going to be the tight end 1 rest of the season, but that doesn't matter, right? He doesn't need to be the tight end 1 rest of the season. It's going to be very valuable to add. And his role is clearly increasing in recent weeks. He's not only gotten more rushing attempts, but the targets have been more consistent. That's the big thing. That's why it was so difficult for him to hit a consistent ceiling when you're getting 1 target. Because if you don't catch it, even if you're getting these carries, if you're in a half or full PPR league and you have 0 receptions, well, now he has to score a touchdown and do anything because he's not getting any of those free points for the receptions. So definitely going to be difficult to project because, it is so random how they use him. He's going to project for 1 pass attempt, a few targets, and some carries. And if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's probably giving you 6 points? But it's tight end. I mean, how many tight ends are you really relying on? He's my tight end 9 rest of the season. If you factor in now what his usage has been overall, and then lean a little bit more towards what he's been doing recently, tight end 9 rest of the season, that's right behind Evan Ingram, Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson. He's right in the range with all those players. And so if you need a tight end that's in that general range, definitely go after Taysom Hill, especially since, he's got that high weekly ceiling. He's someone that isn't going to go out there and have, 8 or 9 points every week. He's going to dud sometimes, but so will every tight end. And he has 20 points in his range of outcomes, which not every tight end has. Behind Hill, it's the usual bunch, right? Take a shot on a rookie tight end you think could break out in the second half of the season. Luke Musgrave is probably the most likely to be available on free agency because obviously, Kincaid's not, Laporta's not on free agency anymore. Or you can look at Jonnu Smith, Cade Otton, one of these tight ends that, has been involved, is coming off good games, can see better production in the future. I don't really think Smith or Otton really has an elite ceiling rest of season, but we saw them have really, really good games last week. Both have really bankable roles. We know their roles really aren't going away this season. Otton in particular, he's playing 97. He played 100% of the snaps last week. So even though, Evans, Godwin, they're going to dominate the target share there, he's able to rack up production just by being on the field all of the time. And if you're always on the field, you have a better chance of lucking into some touchdowns, of getting just some random targets thrown your way. If you're playing 60%, you don't have that much in your range of outcomes. So, both those players, decent ads if you need a tight end. At quarterback, definitely go after Kyler. If he's for some reason available and you didn't go after him after we talked about it last week, go after him this week. Should be getting the start this week. And while there's definitely a wide range of outcomes for how he's going to look, right? How much is he going to run it? How is he going to look passing it? One of those possibilities for how he looks is good enough to be a top 7 quarterback for a season, especially with how many injuries there have been at the position this season, and that's super valuable. So if that's available in free agency, you have to go after that. I'd also definitely look at Joshua Dobbs. He was fantastic, as we talked about earlier, like in relief last week, which is wild because he didn't even know the plays. Like he was walking into the huddle, like asking people, what do I have on this side? Like what routes are you guys even running? Because I haven't had time to, remember this entire playbook. And that just makes the fact that Arthur Smith has now lost 2 straight games to backup quarterbacks even better. Now that we know one of those backup quarterbacks didn't even know what plays were being run, and he still managed to lose to them. But I think it's a testament to Dobbs was good with not very much help on the Cardinals to start the season. Now he moves over to the Vikings. Way better skill players, way better environment, way better coaching, like play calling. He's got upside. He has a ton of upside rest season. He's my quarterback 9 rest of season. And I'm sure he's available in free agency in a lot of leagues. And let's be honest, if they get Jefferson back, they've got Addison breaking out, Hawkinson, like this passing attack is awesome. They're not going to run the ball that much because now Cam Akers is hurt. Madison's been ineffective. Like they're probably just going to still air the ball out a ton. A lot of upside for Dobbs rest season. After those 2 pure streaming options, you've got Geno Smith versus the Commanders. This is the 6th best matchup for quarterbacks. Sam Howell at the Seahawks. That is the 7th best matchup for quarterbacks. And then Baker versus the Titans. Pretty neutral matchup for quarterbacks, but I would say it's more positive for the Bucs because so much of the production flows through, as I said before, Evans and Godwin. Well, it's the best matchup for opposing wide receivers. And so you've got an amazing matchup for those 2. Well, that's going to translate over to Baker. Maybe other positions don't have as great matchups, but as so much flows through those 2, Baker's going to have a good ceiling there. But there's still going to be a lot of players that project better than Baker. That's probably for those of you in like competitive 12-team leagues when you got someone hurt around by, or deeper leagues. I would stick to the ones we mentioned before. They're definitely better this week. Then finally, defense streaming options this week. Number 1 is Seattle. Well, not number 1 ranked, but number 1 that is even possibly available in free agency. Number 1 is Dallas this week. It is unfair, Dallas. Dallas is at home against the Giants. So the Giants have given up the most points per game to opposing defenses, are now on the road without Daniel Jones at Dallas. Like that is unfair, right? But number 1 that you could actually go after is Seattle. They're tied for 7th in points per game, taking on the Commanders team. It's allowed the 4th most points per game to opposing defenses. A lot of sacks this season. I will note, last 2 weeks they've been a lot better at preventing sacks, and Sam Howell is just playing awesome right now. So we could definitely see the Commanders do well, but it's still a good matchup for the Seahawks. Number 2 is the Bucks. They're scoring like average amount on defense, but they force teams into elevated pass play rates, and they'll get a home matchup with Will Levis, who was sacked 4 times last week. If he has to throw the ball a lot, he could give up a lot of sacks, and he definitely made some ill-advised throws. I think he only had 1 interception, but there were a few that were very iffy that could have turned into turnovers. We know that, he's a rookie, right? And even if he looks pretty good for being a rookie, he's still going to make mistakes. It only takes 1 really bad mistake to have a pick 6, have really good production for opposing defenses in fantasy. So Bucks number 2 there. And then the Raiders versus the Jets. The Jets have allowed the 3rd most points per game to opposing defense and special teams. And while the Raiders have been kind of middle of the pack so far, they're definitely capable of generating sacks. I mean, they had 8 sacks against the Giants last week. Would not project 8 sacks this week, but I think we all looked at how bad Zach Wilson looked in prime time in the game. I guess that was last night. Yeah, the last night's game. He looked bad. He can fall apart at any point. He could have multiple pick 6s. He could get a ton of sacks against him. Like, it's a good spot for the Raiders. I think the Raiders also only 1 point underdogs, which is probably the correct line given how bad Zach Wilson has looked this season. But yeah, I think I like Seattle first, then the Bucks, then the Raiders. So that is a look at how the waiver wire is looking this week. If you want to see my full ordered list, it's up on the site now, has fab recommendations as well. You can also see my updated rest of season rankings over there, along with my running back and wide receiver reports and weekly rankings. All of them have been updated for week 10. That, my friends, is in this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, help hitting the like button. How about subscribing to the channel if you're new here. Thanks for watching.